So, remember when Studio Series kicked off? Remember how it was hyper-focused on bringing those headache-inducing Bayverse designs onto the shelves at the exact same time that Hasbro was trying to recapture the G1 nostalgia? Remember how we were getting new figures for Ironhide and Blackout and Grimlock were one of the fair price point with Generation Style engineering? Remember how, apparently, cool it was to get a full set of Bayverse Constructicons to build into a truly massive Devastator? It was fun, wasn't it? Anyways, they brought it back to G1. Because even in the toy line that's directly focused on one specific point in time for the Transformers fandom, the Hasbro design team still felt the need to inject G1 directly at the point where the toy line was basically wrapping up with just the Bumblebee movie characters. Suddenly the toy shows weren't packing in Studio Series Bayverse, Galvatron, or the Fallen. Thank God. Instead, we get brand new figures of Hot Rod and Cup and Scourge and Grimlock and Blur, all in an attempt to cash in on the fandom's questionable relationship with the 86 movie. But I guess some of these characters needed new toys eventually, right? Because the last time we got Cup and Scourge and Blur, they were all inexplicably just transformed into Headmasters. Meanwhile, Hot Rod not only gets a Headmaster figure, but he also gets a Leader figure where he turns into Rodimus. When really what anyone wanted was just normal ones without any forced gimmicks to fit into the MO of the current state of the toy line. But if that's the case, why put him in Studio Series instead of something like Earthrise or Kingdom? Regardless, our Studio Series 86 representative comes in the form of Deluxe Class Jazz. Because let's face it, Jazz is just one of the Autobots that you have to get right. He remains one of the most recognizable characters in the lineup and has been since day one. He was the third Autobot to ever appear on screen. He was in the first wave of the original cast to be brought over from Japan. He's fighting off against Skywarp in the original opening theme song. And he's pretty much remained unchanged as one of the franchise's most beloved characters. Well, mostly unchanged anyway. So in keeping with the G1 eccentricities, we're starting off Mr. Maester in his classic Porsche 935 Turbo Alt mode, albeit with the rounded and slightly bloated proportions of the cartoon. And while I'm not an automobile enthusiast, this is still a pretty slick looking ride. It just has that speed racer energy of a super cool, super fast, super sleek sports car. It just oozes confidence and smoothness, much like the character, and the blue and red stripe just pops hard against the stark white. Love that super low red bumper that leads up to the Auto brand displayed proudly on the hood. And moving on to the side, you get the number 14 instead of the 4, which, according to the designer, is supposed to be a reference to both his G1 and G2 paint jobs, though TF Wiki does point out that he was originally number 14 in the Diaclone days. The spoiler itself is a bit large, but it totally works as a cartoonified version of a real-life sports car. It's not a problem, I'm just talking. Now while I do enjoy this car mode, there are a few things I can critique. You got the feet poking out the rear bumper without really blending in at all. Thankfully, Repro Labels is already on that, but it's kind of annoying that I have to make the effort to actually hide the feet. And while the red and blue stripe is cool, it does kind of bring to life how dull the car mode is in terms of deco. I mean, he has it where it counts, what with the headlights and the grille and the silver painted rims, but for the most part, the paint is really scarce, which kind of leaves the vehicle mode looking a bit drab. Also, you can plug his photon rifle onto the roof, and that's kind of it. So all in all, despite a few design and paintworks, this is still a quality little car mode that catches the character's personality without sacrificing too much. And I certainly prefer this kind of car versus the one he got in 07. Well, not a bad car by any stretch, just does kind of feel like what would happen if Jazz listened to 50 Cent as Snoop Dogg instead of Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington. It's basically turning Jazz from a Scatman Crothers fan to someone who follows Chameleon on Twitter. You know what I mean, right? This feels more like a thug-like rebel instead of a laid-back cool cat. I'm sorry, what are we talking about? How are you now a robot? Transformation is about as predictable as you can get with Jazz, and I don't mind that. He has one of them simple conversions that you don't want to hamper with a gimmick or make overly complicated. You fold out his limbs, flip out his head, and then you put everything else on the back. It's very basic, but it works. Take some notes, Toy World. Though you might want to be careful with the backpack, and I'll get to why later. As a robot then, you can see he takes more influence from the cartoon model than the original toy. And it's pretty easy to tell with the absence of door wings, the wheels hiding away, and the general sparsity of detail on his belly section. And like I mentioned in my Warpath review over a month ago, your acceptance of this would definitely hinge on your tolerance for bad 80s animation. In Hand, however, is a different story, as Jazz is serving up all the great old school vibes. Trust me, if someone asked you to think of an Autobot with a car hood for the chest, Jazz will probably be one of the first you think of, right? The entire front portion of the car is just sticking out from under his chin like a robot training bra. It's once again displaying the Autobot symbol loud and proud while leading up to this tremendous head sculpt. You've got the blue visor and the silver mouth plate, all encompassed by a black helm that seems to have a subtle Mr. T mohawk. All it's missing is a cocky smirk and it'll be perfect. Otherwise, the limbs themselves check out just fine. You have the white 5 fronts leading down to the black and silver shin pieces with massive wheel arches on his ankles. I actually really love the grille detail in there that's gonna look so cool once I get the stickers on them. And it's also really nice at how the spoiler just splits apart to form the heel pieces. The arms are pretty basic, all things considered. Just a couple of boxes latched together with an obligatory fist at the end. Shame about the hollowness in the arms where the fists need to go in vehicle mode, but it's nothing too egregious. The backpack itself does bulge out a little bit, but it's actually really impressive how they take the entire roof and the doors of the car mode and and stashed it away like a rucksack. But with that said, it's time we get back to the critiques. Why, for the love of Primus, is his entire backpack made of translucent blue plastic? I've actually heard horror stories of this piece breaking off right out of the box, and even the ones that didn't break show a bunch of hairline fractures. Thankfully, mine doesn't have this issue, but that might be because I'm taking things slowly after those horror stories. And yes, I know, they put out a statement explaining why this couldn't be solid plastic. It's to keep the cost down while also preserving materials, I get that. But given that no one else in this line uses translucent plastic in any meaningful way, why do it just for Jazz? And as for actual issues with the toy, the knees are not exactly solid. I mean, unlike Cyclonus, they at least peg in somewhere, but it's just that the tabs holding the shin in place are way too small to have any real friction. I'll be going to pose this guy that suddenly the knee gives way, revealing how hollow he is inside. Just what is it with my reviews lately and complaining about the knees? He has the standard ball-jointed head and universal shoulder hinges. The shoulders actually have some molded detail as to avoid breaking the sculpt, which is nice. And then you get elbows and waist and plenty of swing in the hips. And then he closes it all with tight thigh swivels, the aforementioned knees, and crazily, disturbingly deep ankle pivot. Just pop the gun in his hand and he looks like he's ready to kick your ass in style. And in keeping with Studio Series tradition, he also comes with a cardboard diorama. This one depicting that brief moment in the movie where he and Cliffjumper are hanging out on Moonbase 1. And I'd be happy to show it to you, if I didn't bin it. Look, I just don't care for the dioramas. They just take up way too much space in this house, and honestly, they're kind of unnecessary. I am perfectly happy with the figure, thank you. And that's the best way to describe my feelings with Jazz. Perfectly happy. Like, he's not a particularly groundbreaking toy or even that unique. It's just Jazz. But that's ultimately what makes him so special in the Transformers world. There's no mystery or secrets to unlock with him, because what you see is exactly what you get. And what I've got is an unambiguously cool figure with one of the most distinct characters in the entire franchise. And if nothing else, he's better than that one. Ugh. So thanks for watching. I'm gonna go listen to a Film Noir soundtrack to get myself into the mood. But until next time, because there always will be one, this is Callum Lewis, the Media Hood, signing off.